On today's episode of r/ProRevenge, a garage thief gets arrested. Then a nosy, big mouth roommate gets fired from her job. And finally, a hazing ritual at a local mechanic shop comes back to bite the company in the butt. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss another video. And the first story is called Theft Isn't Victimless. And yes, I did take it personally. This was about 2 years ago while I was living at my buddy's place. His place wasn't in the best part of town, so theft happens all the time. And for the large part, most of these crimes are met with a sucks to be you attitude from the police, who then create a report and forget anything happened entirely. Okay, so I wake up early on Thursday morning with a call from my roommate who was running to work at 5 a.m. And he explains the detached garage had been broken into. The thief broke in through the window and stole a bunch of stuff, with highlights being Milwaukee drills, motorcycle jackets, and the receiver and the sub from one of those surround sound systems in a box package deals, but leaves the speakers around the rest of the place. Saying I was livid is an understatement. I work hard for my things and have no intention of replacing them so some jerk can sell them for a very small profit. So for roughly the next 4 days, my focus is entirely on this, and you'll see why shortly. So I know the chances are slim that I'll ever find my stuff, but hey, it can't hurt to look for it on the common online sales places. I used eBay searching local sellers only, and I put alerts on Craigslist, an extremely handy feature. And I tell my roommate to keep an eye on Craigslist since he has a little time. So fast forward to Friday, my roommate calls me up and tells me he thinks he found our stuff on Craigslist. I pull up the ad, and sure as hell, there it is. This beautiful, not so bright gentleman had taken all the stuff he took from us and put it into a single ad in the barter section of Craigslist. He even added the model numbers, not serial numbers, making things very easy to identify. The giveaway was this cheap surround sound system, for which he only had the receiver and the sub, and after a quick search reveals this particular system is only sold as a package. You can't buy the single components. So this was definitely our stuff. I call the police, thinking case closed. But guess what? They don't care that I found this stuff on Craigslist. And after about 20 minutes of complaining on the phone with the non-emergency, they ask me what I want them to do. I say, send a car over here. I want to speak with someone directly. So they reluctantly send a car with a very nice officer, who runs the number associated with the Craigslist ad, and guess what? He's got a rap sheet with a mile long, and has been arrested like 10 times for theft. With the break in the case, I think I'm home free. But nope, the cop can't do anything. The investigator needs to take care of this, she says, and leaves. So I call the investigator, who doesn't work on Fridays. I ask who I can speak with, so they send me up to the investigator's team line, to which no one answers at all. I try again on Saturday, and learn investigators don't work weekends at all, and I'd have to wait until Monday before I can talk to my investigator. Good thing crime doesn't happen on weekends, otherwise cops' weekends would be in trouble. So I call on Monday, and Sergeant Drags His Feet is out sick. It was at that point I was done trying to call them. I drove to the police station and demanded to speak with an investigator. I mentioned to this new investigator the situation, and the name of the guy who was in the Craigslist ad. And the cop knows him very well, and has arrested him on a couple occasions. The cop is confident the police can now help me since I've already done all the dang work here. Finally, the cop tells me to make a meeting with this guy and let him know when and where. So again, the work is on me, and to meet this guy. Thanks, police. So I text him a few times with no response. Then I call him and joke around and express interest in a variety of items, most of which are mine, but a few that aren't, since simply asking for the things from one of the victims is suspicious in my mind. So I tell him I'm Christmas shopping. I then say I'm from out of the area and ask him to pick the location, and he lists off a few places, one of which is a grocery store within eyesight of the police station. So I picked that, and laugh to myself at how this is turning out. I call the cops, let them know the deal is on, and when and where it is. They say they'll be in an unmarked car and that I should take my wallet out as a sign to swoop in and make the arrest. So I pull into the parking lot. I see no cops, and I stop and wait. I think the guy is a no-show when he finally shows 10 minutes late. My heart's pounding at this point. I get out, meet the mastermind criminal, and shake his hand. He proceeds to pull out my stereo, then my drills, and a few other odds and ends, and before I can get my wallet out, a gold Taurus speeds in and out pops 3 cops with guns drawn and cuffed the guy. When this happened, I just turned around and walked away for a second while they put him in the car. The lead cop asked me if this is my stuff, and I say yes, it matches with the previously provided very detailed description I gave the police. All the while the guy in cuffs is yelling, "That's my stuff!" Finally the cops get the warrant for his apartment, find the rest of all our stuff, and a few other people's things. And I have all my stuff back by Wednesday the following week. He received 1.5 years in a state penitentiary for his efforts. Story number 2 is called Delete My Files, Roommate? So much for your job. This happened several years ago. I was living with my girlfriend at the time when she unexpectedly passed. I was devastated and knew about 2 or 3 weeks after that I simply could not continue living in the 2-bedroom apartment we shared. Side note, life is good now. Happily married. This was awful at the time though. I mentioned this to my sister, who I've always been close with, and that I was considering moving into a studio or a 1-bedroom apartment. She had a better idea. She was my senior by a few years and owned a house. She also happened to have an empty room that she was mostly using as a half-assed home office. I thought it was a great idea. While I wanted to be out of the apartment, I also wanted to be around people, and my sister was one of the best people I knew. I agreed and broke the lease on my 2-bedroom. The property management company was actually rather sympathetic to my situation, and I didn't have to pay all the usual penalties involved in breaking a lease. The room was nice. It was great hanging out and bullshitting with my sister. I still missed my girlfriend, but things were okay. The problem was the roommates. My sister was renting one of the 3 bedrooms in the house out to a renter to make the mortgage a breeze. The roommate was oddly terrible. She was impeccably clean, always paid rent and utilities on time. However, she said some of the most vile things imaginable about celebrities, people on the news, and her coworkers. My sister wanted her gone, but figured it'd be less trouble just to not renew her lease rather than try to evict her. The roommate knew why I was there. About 2 months in, she started suggesting that I go out and start dating again. I ignored her, or brushed her off. Then one day I came home to find that she had deleted the photos of my girlfriend from my desktop computer. I was enraged, but also vigilant about regular backups after reading about other people's horror stories, so I'd really lost nothing. I confronted her about it, and she said she'd done it. Her words were something to the effect of, "It's been 4 months. You need to stop moping around like a wussy and get a piece of booty. I just gave you a much needed kick in the butt." I formed a plan and ran it by my sister. It'd likely involve her losing the revenue stream from her renter, but I could make up for that. Plus, she wanted the jerk gone. So over the course of several evenings, I recorded conversations with the roommate. This was perfectly legal, as we lived in a single-party consent state. During these conversations, the roommate ranted about her coworkers, including calling her boss a racial slur, and the boss's kids a racial slur as well, and other horrible things. After I'd collected about a week or 2 worth of conversations that proved it was undoubtedly her, I sent them to her work. She came home early the next day, mostly because she was fired and no longer had a job. Since she couldn't pay rent, my sister evicted her. The girl had to move back in with her parents, an hour and a half outside of the city. I bumped up what I was paying my sister, and life was good. Story number 3 is called My Worst Job Ever. When I was fresh out of high school, my sister's boyfriend offered me a job as a mechanic at a local dealership. The job was an apprenticeship and was at one of the worst dealerships I've ever had the displeasure of working at. I could tell you dozens of stories about being an apprentice that would discourage anyone from taking up the position. However, I feel like my experience can be summed up in 3 examples of mistreatment. A 4th-year apprentice was taking a gearbox out of a small car, probably weighs 30 kilograms to 60 pounds. He told me to quote-unquote catch the gearbox as it came out of the car while he undid the last bolt. I told him I wasn't comfortable catching a falling, heavy, sharp, unpredictable mass, and he told me that he would get me sacked if I didn't do what I was told. A fool could have seen it coming. The gearbox fell, I was unable to catch it, and the casing broke on the ground as it landed. The foreman came by and blamed me for the incident. My wages were docked to pay for the gearbox housing. I was later humiliated by another apprentice who filmed the event on his camera phone and showed the rest of the workshop me failing to catch the falling mass of metal. In another incident, I was asked to retrieve 2 tires from the cage, a literal lockable chicken wire cage about 10 square meters large and 4 meters high that was assembled out the back of the workshop to house our tires, to fit to a vehicle. To collect the tires, I needed to climb a ladder to get them from a top rack. As I was up there, I heard the gate close and lock, and one of the mechanics had locked me in the cage as part of a hazing ritual. It was about 35 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit that day, and I was locked in there for 2 hours. Whenever a mechanic came past and saw that I was in the cage, they would take a nearby fire hose and try to hose me down in there. By the time I got out of the cage, I had such bad sunburn I couldn't come into work the next day because I was still vomiting from the heat stroke. My boss did not approve my time off, and I was given leave without pay. The final story, there was an incident where we recovered a bumper from a 4-wheel drive after we attached a bull bar in its place. We used to save these bumpers in case we ever dented one, so we had spares essentially. I was asked to place a bumper on 2 hooks and then climb a ladder to the top of the workshop and hang the bumper on the rafters at the top of the workshop for storage. I don't know if you have ever tried to climb a ladder with no hands and holding a large, somewhat heavy and awkward load that can under no circumstances get scratched or dented, but I assure you, it's difficult. As I was climbing the ladder, it started slipping on the greasy workshop floor and eventually collapsed under me, causing me to fall 4 meters or 15 feet, dropping the bumper, injuring my hand, and resulting in me once again being humiliated by a mechanic who was filming the ordeal. I was told that it was my fault that I fell off the ladder because I quote-unquote wasn't doing it right, and the unsafe work practice was not updated. I should note I had asked another apprentice to hold the bottom of the ladder, and they had neglected to do so. Suffice to say, I was sick of how this company operated, so I spent the next 2 weeks taking photos of unsafe work practices. I took photos of lots of things, including people using a grinder with no guards, no goggles, no gloves, people smoking next to open fuel sources, an apprentice locked in a grease pit, another hazing ritual, and yes, I opened it after taking the photo, 2 apprentices moving a heavy piece of shop machinery into storage by pushing it up a flimsy wooden ramp, apprentices working at heights without railings, hazchem materials that were stored, well, anywhere, not locked up. You get the idea. I sent the photos along with some accounts of my personal experiences and anecdotal evidence of other unsafe practices I had personally experienced to WorkSafe, a government body that finds workplaces for unsafe practices and ensures they clean their act up. The company I worked for received over $100,000 in fines and had to spend probably another $25,000 in repairs to bring their workshop up to spec. The local mechanics union became involved too, and caused problems around the treatment of apprentices and safe work practices in general. The place is still the largest employer of apprentices in the area I grew up in, but I hear they treat people a lot better now.